Hey, all right, Paul, I'm putting this card up here. It's my California Times card.
Right.
And I want to welcome everybody to I'm Guy Meyer. I'm here with Paul Duchesne. And it's late on a Thursday afternoon here, last day of September. Uh, Paul and I have known each other for a good many years. And Paul, you sort of do, I wouldn't say the same thing, but we have overlapping operations. Tell me briefly what you got going, or tell the people briefly what you got going.
Well, I have a channel on YouTube. It's my name, Paul Duchesne, Duchesne. And I've pretty much been doing, mostly I do political shows and I sort of analyze the news. I just did three or four shows on neoliberalism. I did 5 shows on the Powell Memo, which is the document that's responsible for Fox News becoming who they are today. In between that, I would analyze the New York Times for the week, look at some current books that are out. So I mostly did political shows and I did a few food shows. And if I'm wearing a white coat and I look like I'm a cook, then it's a food show. Otherwise, it's looking like this. It's a political show. I am somewhere to the left of, no, probably a little bit to the right of Richard Wolff, probably. And maybe a little bit to the right of Noam Chomsky. But definitely to the left of a lot of people.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure.
Guy and
I don't know where to even measure myself. I'm not sure if I even know who Richard Wolff is. That just goes to show my own little insert little world. Paul, I remember you started greenage.com, I think probably Green Age Video back in the 90s, I believe, or maybe earlier. Right?
I started Green Age Video right around the time that YouTube came out.
Right. And I think that we had a kind of a, I remember talking to you about it and going, God, he's sort of like got my same kind of vision I have, except that you had I think a much stronger kind of political picture of the world than I did at the time. I remember you bringing up the subject of France Fanon. Yeah, which I hardly even knew, but I was always sort of like stepping back from some of the more hardcore politics. But tell me, here it's now 2021. We both of us have grown a little bit. The world has changed. Tell me about your take on what is progressive and what's not progressive. Has things changed for you? Have you, what level do you reassess, or how do you assess things, Paul?
Well, I've sort of described myself as a dope smoking new age hippie Buddhist oft times. And as I look at things today, I think Donald Trump was the turning point. Up till Donald Trump, you could look at the establishment with a jaded eye and be pretty accurate in describing the flaws in the system. And before Donald Trump, we could see the democracy was in trouble. The economic system was in trouble. And what I used to call democratic capitalism, I now call capitalist democracy. It's a big difference. It's a big difference. And the wording is very important in when we're dealing with things here. But prior to Trump, you appeared to have a fairly corrupt establishment that was feeding money to your corporations and to your wealthy people. The capitalist system itself was producing inequalities, and capitalism by itself will produce inequalities. As Thomas Piketty in Capital in the 21st Century, he did research on 200 years of data. And in the book, which has been criticized that people haven't read the middle of the book, I didn't read the middle. I read the beginning and the end. In the middle of the book, it's all the data. I didn't need to read the data. I need to read what the data was about. And that's why I read the beginning and the end. And the end result of the book is that he came up with a formula, R greater than G. And I have the t-shirt. The rate of return on capital is always greater than the rate of return on labor. The rate of return on capital is always greater, is greater than the rate of return on labor. So the guy sitting there at the pool, at the country club, getting interest on his stock investments is going to always make more money than the guy that's working out there fixing your car or building your house or serving your food. The guy that's sitting there making money on money is always going to make more money than you're going to make working. The system is built, has a built-in inequality into it, which is why it collapses periodically. The big one being the 1929 crash, and then more recently, the 2008 crash. And most of these crashes are due to deregulation. The system was never meant to be totally deregulated. It was always meant to be regulated. And when Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations, the reason he wrote it was a primer for regulation. But the libertarians sort of wiped that all out of it. They focused on what they wanted to focus on. And I've said this a number of times, reading The Wealth of Nations, which is the Bible of capitalism, it's almost like reading the Bible. You can find in the Bible, although you got this Jesus guy running around telling you to love your neighbor, you got, on the other hand, you got people stoning people to death. So you can get anything you want in the Bible. And it's like that with The Wealth of Nations. You get anything you want there also.
Well, interesting. So, I mean, I think I'm starting to see the evidence where we, or the points where I diverge with our thinking. And I've often wondered, how do we extricate, why is it, or is it inevitable that there is somebody in control or making money off of somebody else's work? And I've had this belief that like independent workers of the world, so to speak, need to be, the notion of independence is fundamental in dealing with the problem. And maybe we agree on that, but I feel like when we get into all this regulation of the guys on the top, we end up saying that this is an okay system. We're just going to regulate it, that you control, but now you'll have to control it in a more humane way. And my own thing, and I've kind of come from a sort of like the anti-federalists of the Jeffersonian times, and thinking that that same thing was sort of a current that was trying to flow through in the 60s, where, out of fashion things like small is beautiful, et cetera, was being spoken about, that the rebellion or the revolution would be, how do we become free? How do we drop out, or how do we create systems where we're not sustaining and supporting these dudes up at the top, the whole Wall Street mechanism? So that's where I'm thinking. It was always like, how do we get out of it entirely, as opposed to how do we necessarily regulate it? Go ahead, Paul. What do you think?
I'm not sure where you left me there, right? You talked about independent workers earlier. Are you talking about Uber drivers and people like that?
Oh, no, they're not independent at all.
Well, they theoretically are. That's the whole point.
Huh? They're owned by a company that's financed by Saudis. It's $1 billion company that 10 people or 5 people or 1 person runs the whole damn show. An independent thing would be these, in Marin County, there were, I think, did you ever drive? Yes, you drove cab so did I. 2 or 3 cab companies. They were local and independent. Say what you will, they might have had their flaws, but at least it was something that had there was responsibility in a local level. And
I want to jump in on this for a second, because the whole idea, let me go to Uber, because I mean, Uber, and who was the other one?
What, Lyft?
Who?
Lyft?
Uber, Lyft. There was one that actually preceded the whole bunch of them. It was before that. When they first came into my town to pick somebody up, I'm a waiter in the restaurant. The guy comes in and she goes, "Oh, I got to call a cab." But they still were saying cabs a few years ago. And then now you call an Uber or whatever it is. And I said, "Oh, well, I called the police department to ask them whether," and I stopped them 2 or 3 times. I said, "Oh, are they licensed to come into town?" "No, they're not licensed to come into town. The cab company guy that company is paying a license to pick up somebody in the town." All the cab companies were paying licenses to pick up people in the town. They were paying licenses. They were a licensed company. Mm-hmm. Uber comes along and they said, "We're going to hire you as an independent contractor. You're going to be an independent contractor. I own the company, but you're an independent contractor," which means that you don't have any health benefits. You don't have any. We're not matching your taxes. You're responsible for everything. It sounds like a good deal. You can come to work when you want to come to work. You can go when you want to go. Make it so you're the boss. You're your own boss. That was the mentality that's out there. Well, what they do, they undercut all the industry because they weren't paying any fees and they weren't paying any licensing fees. They undercut all the industries. And literally to this day, right now, they're suing people in San Francisco. They're suing in New York over money that people spent for these taxi licenses because these companies had to pay for licensing fees. These independent workers don't. There you go. Passenger vehicle driver. Look at that. San Francisco. Got the shield and everything.
I'm going through my debris box of storage units. So there you go.
What are those shields worth nowadays?
It's not an actual shield. It's just,
okay, but if it was,
I never had one of the money-making shields. This is just a permit that every cab driver in San Francisco had to wear on their lapel when they drove a cab.
Okay, if it was a shield, the real shield, it'd be worth a couple $100,000.
Once upon a time, but not now, right?
Well, right now, can't make the money because they've been undercut by the independent workers.
Well, let's jump. Let's
go. Okay, we'll get off that.
Yeah, no, but let's see if we can get down to our points. So I'm getting a message that my internet connection is unstable, but I think it's fine. But we do have a time limit here, and I didn't really pay attention. I think we should. Maybe this will be a good entry point for our how we differ, whatever. Tell me about Greta Thunberg and what you were just starting to tell me about how she was mocking Boris Johnson.
Maybe well, she was at some kind of world event conference, and she was up there saying, "Oh, we're going to reduce greenhouse gases, blah 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 blah. We're going to cut emissions, blah 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 blah." She was using blah 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 in the back of 3 or 4 statements that these politicians are making, and at the end of the day, saying they're not doing anything. Nothing's being done. It's all blah blah blah. It's a bunch of talk with no action. And that's what she was talking about, how they're talking with no action. Oh. And I'm going to bring this on back to how you ended the last one about regulation. It seemed like you were arguing against regulation.
I'm arguing for something even more dramatic than regulation. I'm arguing for a world of localized power, localized responsibility. I feel that the 99% that is out there is being manipulated by the corporate world deeply for the last 30 or 40 years. And now I feel like the progressive vision is still on that same kind of mentality of how can we at the top make this world for the people at the bottom better. But it's not about how do we get back to real empowerment where the local cab drivers, cab companies could thrive, that any human being working in a job didn't have somebody who was multiple layers above you controlling you. even if they were regulated or not. Who almost in no like Safeway, the food corporations, the gas station corporations, the this and that. Today is the leaf blower day in San Anselmo. Now, San Anselmo is a small town in California, but it has 40 little apartment complexes in about a half-mile square zone of downtown, mixed in with single-use houses where I live. And they let Thursday be the day for gas blower or leaf blowers, right? So it's a cacophony out there because they're all compressed. And every apartment complex, now that they flipped to, it used to be an apartment manager would be, generally speaking, the owner on a small apartment complex. But now more and more, it's bigger business. They have little management systems. So when you pay your rent to the middle guy. The owner never has to meet the person.
Right.
And the next step simply is direct Wall Street ownership of the management of the apartments. And this is just sort of an ongoing thing. And part of the what it seems like pie in the sky in what, maybe to you, what I'm talking about is all to do with too many people and overpopulation. And how do we become an ecological planet again? How do we get that back to slowing it down? And if the population was to level out and steady state or even start dropping, I mean, there you would have the most natural rebellion against Wall Street that, can you imagine what Wall Street would do if there's less people to buy widgets?
Well, now you're getting into the whole economic discussion, and where you shift from is you've got capitalism, you've got socialism, and you've got what a lot of the thinkers over the last 10 years have been talking about, a steady state economy. A steady state economy. And Schumacher, that you mentioned earlier, small is beautiful, he's one of the proponents. So there's a lot of thinkers in the economic world that have been talking about this for a long time. You want to maintain a society that's going to be functional, prosperous, but not necessarily growing. And that's the difference. Within the capitalist system, you have to grow. You have to grow to make more profits. Now, the whole capitalism gets defined in 1776 when Smith writes The Wealth of Nations, but it really starts at the beginning of the 1600s with the British East India Trading Company. And when they started going after the cotton crops and the sugarcane crops, and they started importing slaves and moving slaves, this was the beginning of capitalism as we know it today, was the movement of slaves around the planet for cheap commodity products.
Okay.
So by the time Adam Smith comes along, it's 100 years after they've been to America. When the thing in America, so like 1606 or something, when the first slaves are brought over here, the 1619 project. Early 1600s, the first slaves are brought over here, and the whole thing starts. And it's originally built around the cotton industry, not sugarcane. The sugarcane quickly comes in as the second industry. So you got all these slaves out there, and they're producing goods for these capitalists who are making money from them. The first factory gets created in 1750. Prior to that, there were no factories.
The industrial revolution, technology.
Right. And that's when, and this was my argument about slavery, Adam Smith viewed anybody, a landowner had a lot of people at his command. If you didn't have anybody at your command, you were worthless. Once the factory system started, a poor worker could go out and have a coat that was made in a factory by 50 people. He therefore, philosophically, had 50 people at his command. The native in Africa has nobody at its command. Neither does the American Indian. Therefore, they're worthless. Therefore, you can turn them into commodities. Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, Volume 2, a footnote on page 557. It's unbelievable. The whole history of capitalism is based on slavery.
I think I have not read The Wealth of Nations.
Well, nobody has. Hardly anybody's read it.
Okay. to me, it's just like the ongoing history of humanity. I mean, and whether it starts at it starts before the 1700s into Europe with the Middle Ages, feudalism. Right. The dude in his castle. And why was he in his castle? Because he was probably originally an invading lord from some other valley that now comes in, and now that he's conquered these people, he has to hide from them and he has to control them. And a lot of this stuff can be seen at many other different cultures across the planet, going back into the Old Testament of, Babylon and Assyria and the Israelites themselves, and the exploitation of people and, wealth. There's always been this factor of greed and what is too much, or what's enough, and what's the, I think capitalism, I feel that like people need to have an energy exchange, right? They gotta have a symbol of something that represents work. A dollar bill represents, once upon a time, it represented X amount of work, and now it's down to this amount of work, maybe it was, and that's like the wampum beads. They represented something. It was, okay, you could carry this with you. You could go to a different tribe or whatever. Hey, I've got this piece of wampum, or in the Polynesia, they had their coins. I mean, this to me is capital. You can call it an ism or not, but I feel like we're.
Well, okay, I see. Okay, you got all during your feudalism period. The reason it's not capitalism is because people weren't taking a bunch of money and investing it into this to do something else with it. People were trying to measure their wealth back in those times. And most people considered the wealth to be the amount of gold you had, or the amount of natural resources you had, which is why when this whole period of exploration started, they thought there was all this gold over in South America and all the silver. And that's why they were sending everybody over here to get the gold and silver. They were measuring their wealth by the mineral that they had, the gold, the silver, or by the amount of land they had that they could farm with. The revolution with capitalism came when Adam Smith said, wealth is produced by the laborer producing products. That's the difference. The laborer is producing the wealth by his sweat. He's making a product which somebody else is selling for more money than he made it. So before that, you had the craftsmen making something. They spent all week making it, and they got back a just return for it. With the capitalism, you wound up with a division of labor, which was the other. For Adam Smith, the division of labor was bigger than sliced bread.
And that's been going on forever.
No, it hasn't.
Sure, it has.
Prior to the factories, you did not have a division of labor.
Oh, you did. You had it.
Somebody wanted to make a pin in England.
Time and ancient Israel and in the New World.
You might have had a division of labor in terms of building pyramids and things like that. Yeah, but there wasn't a division of labor making material goods for other people.
I differ. I think there must have been.
There wasn't. The people, and that's what he discovered. Nobody argued with Adam Smith about that.
No,
it was the biggest change was the division of labor. He gives the classic example of the pin factory. Prior to that, if you wanted to get a pin in England, you had one guy who was making pins. He was getting a piece of metal, he was pounding it out, he was shaping it out, he was putting a point on it, cutting the end off, fixing the end, seaming it together. He could make one pin in about 2 days. And this was the classic example that Smith does. He goes to the factory and looks at these things. With the pin factory, suddenly if you had 10 people making one pin each, they would make 10 pins in 2 days. You put them in a factory with a division of labor, one guy is cutting it, the other guy is sharpening it, the other guy, suddenly they're making 100 pins in a day. And that was a huge change. Yeah. And that was the first factory.
I think it was just part of the class system that was deeply embedded in, if you're going, I'm just thinking of England and, the noble class, the landowners, and the people at the bottom. The people at the bottom were the great majority, and they had no right to move up. They had by birth that was that way, and you can look at it in the highly developed Mayan or Aztec civilizations. They had the same type of experience going on. I mean, I just feel like it's a common thread of control and dominance that I think is part of the human animal. And I don't think it's a good thing, and I think it can be remedied by maybe I feel like the rebellion. I think what Greta is missing, and what I feel like the world's missing, is the power of the 99 to say, no, we don't want to buy this stuff. Well, I mean, I don't get why she's beating the leaders of the world on the head, and the people, the 99, are never encouraged to boycott this, or why support this, people? Greta, take it to the people. Let's make our own shoes. Why do we have to why do I have to have a car when I turn 19 years old? I feel like if the revolution got turned on, which we're not, it could be remarkable.
What
and I think of that in a positive, like a flower power kind of.
What happened to
foolishness, right? The kind of.
Well, what happened to it?
What happened to it?
Yeah, the revolution.
Well, I think was never a noun, for one thing. There was not an it that something happened to. It was always it's like a human thing. It's like, what happened to you, Guy? Or what happened to your dreams? Or a bunch of us as individuals. And it
was a big split back in the 70s.
Some degree of complicitness with the world as it is, and some degree probably of maybe some people might think, oh, personal failure. Maybe there's like guilt, like I'm just throwing that out there. Like when you say what happened to it, I think we have to kind of keep riding the river and let go of the blame or where we went wrong, but see where we are, I hope, and say, well, it's about time now. And maybe nature is getting rather restless with the human race, and maybe overpopulation is rather a frightening thing that hasn't been dealt with.
Eric Utney had an editorial about a year ago where he was addressing it to you and me, and basically telling us to finish what we started in the 60s, that we didn't finish what we started.
Right.
And we didn't. And what happened was, well, I did the show on the Powell Memo. The Powell Memo recognized what was going on. And the Chamber of Commerce asked him, Chief Justice Powell, to write the document in response to the attack on the American free enterprise system. We were not only going after the war, we were attacking the American free enterprise system.
Who was attacking? Sorry.
Huh?
Who was attacking the American?
Me. Sitting in the street on Fifth Avenue against the war. Oh. We were attacking the American free enterprise system. We were stopping people from going into Tiffany's, and Tiffany's on Fifth Avenue was complaining that they were losing business because there were so many protesters in the street every week. Every week we were there. The Women's March, the Vietnam March, the Gay March. Every week there was a march going on.
Really? And it was all aimed at Tiffany's?
No, Tiffany's was on Fifth Avenue. And the marches were all down Fifth Avenue.
Really? Every week?
Almost every week. I was in 3 marches in a month. I was in the Women's March on my way to night school, and I walked for 3 or 4 blocks. Okay. I sat in St. Patrick's, on the steps of St. Patrick's across from Rockefeller Center for a number of times. Mm-hmm. We were shutting down Fifth Avenue week after week. That's why Nixon was going nuts. There were marches all over the country, and it was affecting businesses. And Tiffany and Cartier were complaining about it.
Really?
Literally complaining about it.
Was this specifically SDS, or was this just a broad range?
No, it wasn't SDS. No. Thousands of us coming down. I was just an average student. I wasn't even in fact, I was still a Bill Buckley conservative when it started.
Whoa.
and I was going to night school, and I got converted pretty quickly. Once I saw the pig's head hanging in front of my school entrance one afternoon, I said, what the hell's that? I just want to go to class. What are you bothering me with all this stuff for? Well, I had been in the Air Force already and out. So I got sort of acclimated to what was going on. I became somewhat of an activist. But what happened by 72, 73, 74, you started to listen to Going to Have a Revolution, played by the Thousand Springs and Mantovani as elevator music. So the revolutionary songs from the 60s suddenly got converted into elevator music and became part of daily life. And the wild clothes became acceptable style. We were co-opted. We were commercialized. And as that commercialization took place, there were two factions within the movement: the real political activist and the spiritual activist. And the Beatles represented this really well with the whole thing with Maharishi on one hand, and then the other songs about politics on the other hand. Well, the spiritual guys went in one direction and the political guys went in the other direction, and it was a break. And East West Magazine, New Age Journal, and a couple other magazines talked about this for almost a 5-year period from 83, early 80s, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86. And I wrote letters back about the topic, the break between the spiritual and political. So you wind up with the spirit rock crowd, and you wind up with the anti-war activist. And they didn't come together. They got separated. And the spiritual crowd got more me, 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 me. And the political activists got more, and it was a break. And it's been going on ever since. Well, in the last year or so, they're starting to come back a little bit. But it's a dynamic that sort of, in a sense, explains a little bit about what you're talking about.
I guess if you want to look at it, your perspective, I would say that that spiritual crowd seems to me to be not getting it, and the overly political crowd seemed to me not to be getting it either. And what was missing was this sense of let's just go do it, let's just go be it. And that was and maybe that's just still waiting for the right wave or the energy to come along, and maybe it'll come out of a sense of necessity, as
that's where it comes from.
Huh?
That's when it comes, a sense of necessity.
Right.
And right now, the fascism in the government is getting closer and closer and closer and more in your face.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a reaction to it. But we're going to have to wrap this up soon. How long did we go?
I think that was great, Paul. I think we've gone over what I wanted to do, but I think we've had a good conversation. So it's time to wrap it up.
Yeah.
And,
we'll do it again in a couple of weeks.
Glad you came along. This is wonderful.
Me too.
All right.
I'm going to give you one positive note. I just did a little show upon this. Tristan Harris was on Bill Maher this week, and he was talking about how violent everybody's gotten and how angry everybody is. And what's going on is the algorithms on the internet, in the social networks, take the worst, most violent things and raise them to the top. And that's what gets the most eyeballs. Just like when you're driving down the road and you look at an accident, you don't look at a normal thing, you look when there's an accident. Well, that's the way it is on social network. People look for the most outrageous, worst things, and that's what goes to the top. So 100 people respond to something favorably, they don't get any traction at all. The 2 people that respond negatively, they get the most traction. It's a built-in system reinforcing violence and anger.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's also just the system of our culture that.
No, they have an algorithm that measures it.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, I've been screamed at by probably some people who really support your belief systems really strong, and shouted at and told to go out, leave California, and etc. And the reason I think they do it is because I feel like they want to be heroes. They feel like they are so passionate about what they believe. So if you say one thing that triggers their belief system, that you are part of the quote, the enemy,
right,
then they feel that they are performing a heroic act by dramatically, like aggressively shouting at you or, proving. And to me, that's the the problem with
the typical shoot yourself in the foot Democratic Party.
God bless you. Hey, Paul, let's wrap it up. Good talking. We'll talk more.
Couple of weeks.
All right, you got it. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too.